Welcome to Dialogue. Today, we are attempting something a bit different. A critical cultural examination that goes far beyond the usual celebrity gossip, far beyond the headlines. We want to get straight to the heart of what modern aspiration, what it actually means today.
Exactly. Our mission here is really a cultural autopsy. We're looking at a figure who has transcended reality television, transcended social media to become something much, much bigger than just one person.
Yeah, and that's the key point. We are not interested in the individual. Not really.
No, we're here to dissect the massive cultural symbol she represents. She is, for all intents and purposes, the blueprint for success in the 21st century.
It's true. When you hear the name, you instantly get these specific visuals in your head, right? Perfect Instagram grid, those sharp, almost architectural contours, and a body that, let's be honest, sometimes seems to be arguing with the laws of physics.
Right.
But what we're arguing today is that her real significance, it isn't in her businesses or her fame. It's in the fact that she has become a functional, modern female template.
It's what we're calling the archetype hypothesis.
Sure.
She's not just a very successful personality. She was a modern female archetype, a template that emerged from a society that was, I think, desperately and even unconsciously hungry for something to fill a really profound cultural void. She basically provides a map.
And that's such a powerful distinction because it means she's not an aberration. She's not some random outlier we can just ignore.
No, not at all. She is the perfect logical reaction to the systems and the desires that we ourselves have built. Look, this figure didn't invent modern culture, but she perfected it. She made it efficient. She streamlined it. She made it repeatable. She didn't invent hyper-sexuality. That's ancient. But she industrialized it.
Industrialized it. Wow.
He turned raw desire into a highly profitable, scalable supply chain. And so today, we're here to explore the deep cultural forces, the crumbling of the old gatekeepers, the changing economics of intimacy that made this exact template not just possible, but you could argue culturally essential.
Okay, so let's unpack that. I think we need to start with the foundation. What exactly do we mean when we use the word archetype here? Because it gets used so casually, but it feels like it carries some serious weight in this context.
It does. An archetype, for our purposes, isn't a person. It's a symbolic template that lives in the collective mind of a society. It's the cultural blueprint of values, of aspirations, of standards for an entire era. And critically, these templates dictate what success looks like, even if we follow them completely unknowingly.
So it's less about who the person actually is and much more about what that person allows the rest of us to aspire to.
Precisely. And if you look back through history, these templates always emerge during periods of huge cultural change. Take Cleopatra. She wasn't just a queen. She became the template for strategic, intoxicating female power. She used sex appeal, political maneuvering, military savvy, all of it to dominate the known world. She set a really complex standard.
And then in the 20th century, you get these new templates, but they're often filtered through the Hollywood system.
Right. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just an actress. She was the template for a certain kind of post-war, vulnerable, yet completely irresistible glamour. Her power was in her perceived innocence, but it was combined with this potent sexuality and always framed by the male gaze. Then you get Madonna, who becomes the template for self-reinvention, for unapologetic, aggressive ambition. She combined that with the sexuality that was all about pushing boundaries. Her success was about taking control of the gaze.
So those templates defined the cultural goals for their eras. What then is the new template? What new standard does this modern figure embody for our time? What are the old assumptions about success that she replaced?
Well, she provides a template that's built entirely on a series of substitutions that really define our current digital age. If you had to boil it down, it comes down to 3 core replacements. First, she replaced substance with visibility.
Okay.
Second, she replaced depth with desire. And third, she replaced a true internal identity with a mere image.
That's a staggering shift when you really stop and think about it. Visibility over substance, desire over depth, image over identity. A lot of people have been famous, but this feels like it's changing the very definition of a successful life. But isn't visibility just a new word for fame? How is it different from, say, a movie star being visible?
That's a crucial distinction. With traditional fame, visibility came as a byproduct of substance. You acted, you sang, you wrote a brilliant paper, then you became famous. Modern visibility, though, is the product itself. It's attention that's optimized for an algorithm, and it requires no necessary underlying skill. The goal isn't to do something and then be seen for it. The goal is simply to be seen. That is the achievement.
So she's the ultimate champion of the attention economy, someone who mastered the art of grabbing our attention and then, I guess, retroactively justified it.
It's the ultimate triumph of appearance. And this is all happening in a culture that is really struggling with meaning. When traditional institutions, faith, community, objective truth, when they've all fractured, people lose their bearings. They don't know what a meaningful life is supposed to look like. And into that vacuum, this visually compelling, easily digestible, and monetizable image just rushes in to fill the gap. Appearance doesn't just win, it becomes the only reliable currency we have.
Which leads us to that critical and really uncomfortable truth we have to face when we look at her success. If this figure hadn't emerged organically, society's deep structural need for this kind of visible, endlessly reproducible template would have just manufactured her anyway. The void had to be filled by the spectacle.
Exactly. She is the perfect answer to a question society didn't even know it was asking. And that question was, how do I become commercially successful just by existing aesthetically?
So to really get the gravity of this archetype's influence, we have to see her origin story not as some kind of fluke, but as the perfect product of cultural necessity. She isn't self-made in the old sense of the word. She's the refined outcome of 3 huge, powerful cultural shifts all converging at once.
And if you understand these 3 forces, you start to realize her success isn't luck. It's almost socioeconomic inevitability.
Okay, let's dive into those forces. The first one has to do with how we get attention and power in the digital age.
Right. Force number 1 is the death of gatekeepers.
Right.
Think back 30 or 40 years. You had the old system, Hollywood, New York media. The rule was rigid and it was clear. You must earn attention. That meant years of apprenticeship being vetted by editors, producers, publishers, network execs. They were the tastemakers, the custodians of quality. They decided who was worthy of a platform.
And that system, I mean, you could call it elitist, but it did prioritize craft and substance. You were deemed worthy by a powerful few.
Exactly. But then the internet and social media came along and just changed the fundamental rule overnight. The new rule became, no, you must only capture it. The entire mechanism shifted from a kind of meritocracy earning it to sheer effectiveness in capturing the scroll. Attention stopped being a reward for contribution and became the raw material, the ultimate resource.
And the second attention became the main resource. Controversy became the most efficient way to get it. Talent became, well, literally optional.
Precisely. Yeah. We moved from industry curators who use taste and judgment to algorithm amplifiers who just use engagement metrics, clicks, shares, comments, emotional reactions. And the implication of that is just staggering. The algorithm doesn't care if you're talented, if you're moral, if you're knowledgeable. It only cares if you stop the scroll. This archetype figured out how to create the visual and emotional spectacle to halt that scroll better than anyone in history, and she did it by completely bypassing the need for any traditional gatekeeper's approval.
It's a democratization, I guess, but one that maybe trades quality for sheer volume. And that brings us perfectly to the second force, the monetization of intimacy. If you're capturing attention in these massive volumes, how do you make all that volume profitable?
You blur the boundaries until they just disappear. Historically, there were clear lines, right? Private life was private. Erotic content was usually separate from commercial branding. The self you were at work was different from the self you were at home. She just shattered all those walls. She created a blueprint where your entire self is transactional.
Everything becomes content. And it's often content that doesn't need a studio or a set or a crew. Your phone is enough. The self is the location.
And just look at the specific examples we've seen since she paved the way. What is valuable content now? Your body. Well, that's prime monetizable content. It drives fashion, cosmetic surgery, product sales, your relationship.
Oh, that's a recurring TV series. It's perfect for reality shows and selling lifestyle products.
Absolutely.
And even things that are intensely personal, things that used to be sacred, like trauma or motherhood or vulnerability. That's all definitively content now. The personal struggle, the mental health journey, it's all narrated for public consumption.
And that narration, that performance of intimacy, it generates empathy and engagement, which translates directly into ad revenue and brand deals. The self becomes entirely performative and transactional. We went from having relationships to managing our personal brand's narrative arc. The self is product. That's the final stage of late-stage capitalism.
And this is where it gets really layered, the third force, the female liberation paradox. This is where you see these high-minded political and social ideals just run headfirst into the relentless efficiency of capitalism.
This tension is maybe the most profound cultural clash of the last 50 years. The initial message of feminist liberation was completely valid and necessary. Your body is yours. You have autonomy. You own yourself. That was the political promise of liberation.
And capitalism, being this incredibly efficient machine designed to extract value, responded immediately.
Capitalism basically said, perfect, since you own it, let's establish its market value. You own it, so let's commercialize that ownership and maximize the return on your asset. So the political gain of bodily autonomy was instantly converted into a commercial imperative for commodification.
So the archetype embodies this successful and maybe cynical transaction. But couldn't you argue that using sexuality to get power represents a kind of raw female agency? Isn't she just successfully using her tools?
That is a brilliant point, and it's the nuance we have to explore.
Yeah.
It is, without a doubt, a display of agency. The choice to commercialize is a choice. But the problem arises when that choice, because it proves to be so wildly successful, becomes the required template for other women seeking power. She represents the most refined and successful version of this deal, using personal ownership of the body as a commercial commodity, achieving success by maximizing the value of the self as product. The successful use of agency quickly turns into a commercial mandate for a whole generation.
It sets the bar. If you want to succeed in the attention economy, this is the proven roadmap, and it involves monetizing what used to be the private self.
Exactly, and the paradox is that the very tool intended for personal liberation autonomy became the mechanism for a kind of market enslavement. You are only as free as you are profitable. And this intensive commercialization of the self, it takes us beyond the individual and into the realm of the entity. At some point, the person stopped being the focus and became a vessel for the ultimate product, the brand.
The transformation from a woman into essentially a brand wearing a woman, it feels complete. And understanding that shift helps us understand why the power she has is so durable.
Her power is often misidentified. People think it's just raw, untamed, chaotic sexuality. That's a fundamental misunderstanding. Her true power is controlled sexuality. It is engineered, predictable, and totally frictionless.
Explain that distinction again, because raw desire is human and it's messy, but controlled desire, that sounds like a product specification.
Well, raw sexuality is unpredictable. It's emotional, it's sometimes inconvenient, it can be highly divisive, it invites moral judgment. Controlled sexuality, on the other hand, is entirely aesthetic. It is perfectly engineered for mass consumption. It's designed to appeal to the lowest common denominator while somehow maintaining an aura of exclusivity. Nothing in the creation of her image is left to chance or accident or spontaneity.
That sounds not just strategic, but exhausting. It must require immense resources to maintain that perfect facade.
It's the ultimate expression of strategic presentation. Just think about the components. The angles are always precise, often low to maximize height or wide to emphasize certain body parts. The lighting is universally flawless, designed to hide texture, minimize imperfection, and maximize the desired contours.
And crucially, there's the calculated silence, the strategic absence of strong, genuinely divisive opinions.
That absence of friction is the masterstroke. The formula she perfected is femininity without friction. You get the full package of maximum desirability, endlessly looped across all media, but this desirability lacks any sharp philosophical edges. It has no true moral stances that might alienate a segment of the market. It offers no resistance that might slow down the transaction.
Okay, I have to push back a little on that because she has taken very public, very serious stances on things like prison reform. Isn't that political friction?
It's friction, yes, but it's commercially safe friction. Prison reform, specifically the push for clemency and reducing mandatory minimums, is a position that, while political, is framed entirely around compassion and justice. It is not an aggressively divisive stance like, say, wading into highly contentious culture war issues that would endanger her brand partnerships. It adds a layer of intellectual gravitas, a seriousness designed to humanize the brand, without actually alienating her massive consumer base.
So it's a form of strategic social positioning, a way to appear complex and serious without actually risking the commercial model.
Absolutely. It's calculated neutrality dressed up as moral depth. The package is aspirationally beautiful and commercially neutral. And society, which craves frictionless consumption and doesn't want its celebrities challenging its moral foundations, overwhelmingly approved of this model. It sent the message, yes, this is the perfect template. More of that effortless, commercially viable desirability, please. And this is where the cultural effect of the archetype moves from just being fascinating to being deeply consequential. She didn't just influence fashion trends like contouring or certain clothing styles. She fundamentally reprogrammed what feminine aspiration means for a generation of young adults.
She didn't just move the goalposts, she replaced the entire concept of the game. The focus shifted so dramatically from internal competence to external presentation.
The ladder of success she established just completely superseded the old metrics like professional expertise, hard-earned knowledge, or the slow, painful process of building something lasting. Those were replaced by four new pillars. First, you must be visible at all times. Second, you must be desired by the largest possible audience. Third, be envied by your peers. And fourth, you must be monetizable, converting that visibility into cash flow.
And the key, like you said, is that every step up on this new ladder is measured entirely by external, quantifiable validation likes, followers, clicks, dollars.
This represents a massive philosophical shift in what achievement even means. In the past, the focus was outward. What can I build? What skill can I master? What solution can I contribute? The value is placed on output.
And now the focus is entirely internalized. It's focused on presentation. The existential question becomes, how do I look while I'm existing? The goal is no longer contribution. The goal is optimized, flawless presence. We see young people aspiring not just to careers, but to achieving what you could call aesthetic dominance. They want to look like they've succeeded, regardless of what they're actually doing.
That shift has profound psychological consequences. If you're focused purely on the look of success, then the appearance of effortless productivity becomes your primary effort. I mean, think about the rise of side hustle culture.
Yeah.
It's often not even about the income. It's about the performative visibility of being a hustler.
That is so profound. It means the primary navigational tool for life fundamentally shifted. The moral compass, which points forward internal principles, character, contribution, it was functionally replaced by the mirror, which only reflects external presentation and immediate social validation. The mirror replaced the compass.
And if the mirror is your compass, your journey is defined by pleasing the audience reflected back at you, not by charting your own internal course based on your values. You're constantly pivoting based on algorithmic feedback. You can't move toward depth because depth is often invisible and unquantifiable. The second you pivot away from the audience, your light fades.
So how does that shift actually manifest in the everyday psychological life of someone trying to succeed today? What does it feel like to navigate life with a mirror instead of a compass?
Well, it creates perpetual anxiety. You can never truly rest. If visibility is the currency, then stillness is poverty. You have to constantly perform, constantly optimize, constantly check for external approval. It leads to the outsourcing of self-worth. If your value is determined by the reaction of the crowd, you have no internal reservoir of worth to draw on when the crowd is silent. It's a recipe for burnout and chronic self-doubt, no matter how successful the outward aesthetic appears.
And this phenomenon radically alters how we interact with and even view our own sexuality. Sexuality stops being relational or private or meaningful. It's not an intimate exchange between two people anymore. It becomes something else entirely.
It becomes strategic, it becomes marketed, and it gets measured purely in quantifiable external metrics, specifically in likes, comments, and follower growth. When you measure the success of your attractiveness based on algorithmic response, sexuality ceases to be about human connection or pleasure. It becomes entirely about market validation. Your body becomes a marketing asset.
And that's the core critique of the supposed empowerment that came with this archetype. On the surface, it looks like ultimate female control and agency. I am choosing to use my body how I wish. But if the performance is dictated by what the algorithm rewards, and if success is measured in likes,
then the appearance of empowerment is actually sexuality outsourced entirely to an algorithm. You're serving the machine, not yourself, and the machine only cares about engagement.
it's the ultimate feedback loop. You present an image that gets rewards, so you refine the image to get more rewards, until the image is unrecognizable from the authentic self. The self just becomes a hollow shell, optimized for external validation. Let's talk about the massive emotional and social disconnect that comes from this model. We, as a culture, we doubled down on sexual freedom over the past few decades, and the philosophical promise behind that massive shift was deceptively simple. More sexual freedom will lead to greater happiness.
Less repression, better societal health. That was the theory. So we followed through on it for a couple of decades. Now, if we take inventory, what are the results, especially for young adults? We are paradoxically more naked in the sense that exposure and performance are rampant, but we are also more anxious, more lonely, and more confused about commitment and genuine relationships than any generation before us.
It's true. We've created an environment where sex is ubiquitous. It's everywhere you look. Advertising, media, music, social feeds. It's easy to access, easy to talk about, easy to consume. But true, genuine, committed intimacy, it seems to be vanishing.
It is the definition of a disconnect, a high-sex, low-intimacy society. The modern archetype serves as the perfect ambassador for this environment because she embodies the success of visibility and desirability without requiring depth. She didn't cause the intimacy void, but she thrives within it, and she amplifies the signals that create it. Her success validates the high visibility, low commitment model.
So what's the deep consequence when sex stops being a rare or special commodity, something saved or earned, and just becomes totally generalized and hyper-visible?
It results in what you could call the sacred loss. When everything is sexualized, from food marketing to friendship, from gym wear to social interactions, then nothing remains sacred. Nothing is held separate, special, or contained anymore. Everything is available on demand. And that lack of sacredness applies directly to human connection, too.
If the bar for entry to physical connection is lowered by hypervisibility in dating apps, what happens to the perceived value of depth and commitment?
Well, when everyone is striving to maximize their desirability and maximize their options by constantly optimizing their appearance and presence, the concept of being truly chosen by one person just dissipates. It disappears into a sea of infinite competing alternatives. If I'm so easily replaceable, why should I bother with the messy, difficult work of being vulnerable and committed? Why choose one diamond when you have an infinite stream of shiny pebbles constantly coming across your screen?
That's why the language shifts too. The term desirable replaces lovable. Lovable implies internal character and commitment. Desirable just implies external appeal and market value.
Exactly. And the most heartbreaking part of all this is the loneliness.
Hmm.
People mistake digital validation for genuine connection. You can have millions of people who desire you, who give you that momentary hit of validation, but you have no one who truly knows you. No one who sees the uncurated, flawed self. The archetype provides a template for maximizing desirability, but it provides no template for overcoming loneliness. And that lack of sacredness, that overwhelming presence of competing desirability, it creates an internal contagion that directly impacts modern relationships from the inside out. We call this the quiet damage.
Right. The individual is constantly comparing themselves or their partner to an endless stream of optimized, filtered fantasy. The relationship is always being judged against an unattainable standard.
And this dynamic introduces three major relationship disruptors that are fundamentally eroding commitment. The first one is endless comparison. Every dating app, every social media feed, it showcases a highlight reel of humanity-curated images, perfect lighting, exotic vacations that are just not real life. But those images set the baseline expectation for what a partner should look like and what a life should contain.
The second is the unrealistic expectation derived from fantasy. You stop expecting your life to be about shared vulnerability and joint effort, and you start expecting it to look like a perfectly edited 24/7 highlight reel, and you expect your partner to consistently perform accordingly.
Always be camera ready, always exciting, always providing content. Yes. Yeah. And the third disruptor is the culture of disposable partners. It's fueled by the perceived illusion of infinite choice. If the relationship gets difficult, if the work outweighs the pleasure, the immediate social narrative is that you should just move on. Why invest deeply in the flawed humans standing in front of you when the technology suggests there are thousands of better, less flawed humans just a swipe away? That ease of a potential upgrade makes commitment feel irrational.
This illusion of competition is devastating because nobody actually wins, not even the people who are maximizing their desirability.
No, the dynamics are fundamentally flawed for everyone involved. Men are essentially chasing fantasy figures that have been digitally enhanced, filtered, and curated figures that simply do not exist in reality. Meanwhile, women feel pressured to perpetually compete with an illusion, a digital phantom of perfected, effortless femininity. The end result is that both sexes lose, because the standard for a successful relationship is an unattainable reality.
And what happens to the qualities required for a durable, meaningful relationship in this highly volatile environment? Things like patience, effort, vulnerability.
Depth is inevitably and brutally downgraded. Commitment stops feeling like a safe harbor or a foundation for growth. It starts feeling like a restriction, a constraint on your perceived infinite options. Depth is perceived as boring because it lacks the instantaneous chemical hit of novelty that the algorithm provides.
And silence, that necessary stillness that you need for genuine introspection and true, deep connection, that starts to feel actively threatening.
That's the critical piece. Silence feels threatening because it lacks external validation. If you or your partner are sitting quietly together, reflecting on something internal, and you aren't posting about it, you are getting 0 likes. That silence becomes associated with an existential threat in an attention economy. If I'm not getting external validation, am I even okay? Is this relationship even real?
The logical endpoint of this algorithmic attention economy is it's terrifying for relationships. Why would you bother investing deeply and vulnerably in one person when the opportunity for external, low-effort attention and validation is infinite? The effort-reward ratio is utterly broken in favor of low-effort, high-volume attention. So we've traced the rise, the commercialization, the societal cost to relationships. Let's pivot now to the root cause of why this archetype was even necessary: a deeper yearning within the culture. The archetype represents, fundamentally, form without soul.
That phrase perfectly encapsulates the spiritual vacuum we find ourselves in. We are a civilization obsessed with external metrics. We've replaced the pursuit of the divine with the pursuit of the aesthetic. Our holy trinity is bodies, status, and applause.
And while we're obsessed with these external things, we seem simultaneously allergic to the qualities that sustain an internal life, that sustain meaning.
An absolute allergy to stillness, to meaning that requires sustained, patient effort to uncover, to true depth that requires vulnerability and moral self-reflection. We replace the profound human desire for transcendence, for something bigger than ourselves, something unseen, with the simple, immediate pursuit of visibility. It's an act of spiritual reduction.
And the predictable result of this massive spiritual substitution is just collective exhaustion. Trying to maintain aesthetic dominance and flawless presentation 24/7 is not only psychologically draining, it's financially ruinous for the average person trying to keep up.
The archetype perfected the act of looking effortless, but the reality is that the effort required to produce that form without soul is immense. And that brings us to the irony, which is maybe the most tragic part of this whole discussion. Despite perfecting the image, despite building this undeniable commercial empire, the figure herself appears to be searching for meaning and legitimacy beyond the brand.
Yeah, we see a very distinct pivot in recent years, one that focuses on pursuits that are disconnected from the core aesthetic brand.
Exactly. Her visible dedication to law, her intense and public focus on motherhood as a serious endeavor, her active attempts to project intellectual depth and gravitas, all of this suggests an internal recognition that the perfect image alone is profoundly empty. She's trying to retroactively inject soul into the form.
It's almost as if the machine she built, which granted her infinite validation, eventually began to consume her need for actual enduring substance.
That is the tragic conclusion. The machine eats everyone eventually, even the one who perfected the machine. The endless pursuit of external approval creates an internal hunger that visibility cannot satisfy. Even the successful archetype, the one who made the deal and won on a spectacular, unprecedented level, eventually feels the profound emptiness inherent in the system built purely on appearance and attention metrics. There's a spiritual ceiling to what pure visibility can provide. So if we synthesize all of this, the most important takeaway is to shift perspective. The archetype is not the villain of this story, nor is she a random cultural fluke. She is the mirror. And mirrors are completely impartial. They only reflect back the choices, the values, the deep-seated anxieties, and the longings of the society that looks into them.
And that leads us to the pivotal question we have to ask ourselves, moving past simple celebrity scrutiny and focusing on cultural self-reflection. The easy question is, why did Kim rise? The world has always had famous people. The critical, much harder question is, why did we need her? What profound vacuum in our collective spirit did we fill with the spectacle of appearance and the monetization of intimacy?
That is the essential question. It demands a kind of internal reckoning, because every archetype eventually collapses and makes room for a new one as the current model exhausts its utility. We can already see the focus on perfected appearance and frictionless desirability tiring people out. The question for the future is, what will define the template that replaces this current obsession? Will it be defined by hard-won authenticity, by expertise, by tangible contribution, or something else entirely?
We stand at a cultural crossroads, realizing that maximizing external validation has led to minimal internal fulfillment. The search for a new compass is already underway.
When a society worships appearance long enough, it inevitably forgets what it truly looks like to be whole.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation, and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.